Good evening, all.
Hey, everybody.
Good evening.
Brian, I just emailed you. Did you get that information? Okay.
Yeah, Mike, I'll update that calendar tonight and ship you an email tomorrow that you can look at on Monday when you're back.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
There I am.
We do have 8 people, so I don't know if maybe we want to get started. Just on a quick note, I see I've trained everybody well. Nobody else noticed that my computer system accidentally put a Teams meeting link at the bottom of the meeting invite. So everybody didn't scroll any further than the Zoom invite, so thank you for that. Please disregard that. It's another wonderful Microsoft enlightenment that they sneak in there when you least expect it.
Okay, I guess we can get started then. We're recording, very good. Okay, welcome everyone to the Revere High School Building Committee meeting number 33. Today is Thursday, April 28th, 2022, and the time is 5:35 p.m. Linda, if you could do the roll call, please.
I will do the roll call for attendance. Mike Bacardi,
Here.
Mayor Arrigo. Absent. Stacy Bronson Rizzo.
Here.
Excellent. Susan Gravellisi.
Here.
Dr. Kelly.
Here.
Carl Svensson.
Here.
John Carella.
Here.
Jennifer Hayes. Absent. Rich Viscay.
Here.
Don Ciaramella. Okay, absent. Nick Rystrom. Absent. Jerry Visconti. Absent. And Patrick Keefe.
Here.
Excellent, thank you. For housekeeping items, we will start with meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was the April 7th meeting, believe it or not, time flies. And this was emailed out to everyone yesterday morning for review.
Motion to accept the meeting minutes from April 7th, 2022.
Second.
Second. Ah. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. I
Gotta be a little quicker, Michael.
Okay.
All right, we will do a roll call for approval of meeting minutes from the April 7th meeting. Mike Bacardi
Yes.
and Stacy Rizzo,
Yes.
Susan Gravellisi,
Yes.
Dr. Kelly,
Yes.
Carl Svensson,
Yes.
John Carella,
Yes.
Rich Viscay,
Yes.
and Patrick Keefe.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. That is all I had for housekeeping this week. Brian, you want to continue?
Sure, thank you, Linda. So we have just a few quick verbal updates on the agenda before Perkins Eastman and their team take you through a schematic design update. The first one was an MSBA process update. We did get the comments into MSBA last Monday, the team's response and the city's response to their comments on the preferred schematic report. And it also, that submission culminated in an MSBA board approval for the project yesterday, which a few folks from the project team, including Dr. Kelly, attended and went very smoothly. So it's a wonderful milestone to have their letter in hand saying you can proceed to schematic design, partially because we already have proceeded to schematic design. So that's a nice milestone to be over. I'm not sure if anyone who was on those meetings wants to say anything, but the MSBA process continues to go very well. Otherwise, just a quick update on the CM procurement process. And I'm going to keep this pretty brief for reasons I'll explain, but we did receive 6 proposals from CM firms responding to the advertisements and the request for qualifications. I'll remind everybody, it's sort of a two-phased procurement where folks apply to be qualified for the project. And then once they are deemed qualified or not qualified, they are issued a request for proposals, and they'll come back to us with a request for proposals. So the 6 applicants were 6 expected names, no surprises, no joint ventures. They included Suffolk Construction, Skanska, Shawmut, Gilbane, Consigli, and Turner. So all big firms, all known commodities to the whole project team and to a number of people in the city. The CM selection subcommittee had a meeting this week and basically narrowed the field down to 5. One of the 6 applicants for this project and the size of this project was deemed not qualified. And apologies for the dogs barking in the background here. But I don't really want to get into which of the 6 was deemed not qualified because we haven't put the notices out yet to them, and I'd rather them find out directly than hear it on this meeting. So I'm not going to mention that, but by Monday we'll be issuing 1 not qualified letter and 5 qualified, and here's the request for proposals. That process has a number of meetings through this month that we're still nailing down a date here and there for, but long story short is by the first week in June, we will have a notice to proceed from one of those for one of those 5 CM firms. So that process remains to be going well, and it's going to chew up a lot of that subcommittee in our time in the next month in May to get through that whole procurement. Anyone have any questions or comments on the CM update? If not, I would say we could hand it over to Perkins Eastman and their team to run through the slides and the schematic design update.
I think that's me, Brian. So let me share my screen. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. And if you went away for vacation week, Diane, I hope you had some time, but I hope everyone enjoyed vacations and time away if they took it. So here we are tonight. Here's our agenda, which Brian and Linda got underway. We are already on item 5, schematic design update. So I'm here tonight to talk about exterior materials. I know that we have a exterior materials subgroup that will be convening and having these deep conversations, but wanted to set the stage for some of that. And then I don't know if anyone has any strong feelings on anything I present tonight, good or bad. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you're fearful of, what you're excited about. And that way we can start to put together an exterior materials palette that, that we will put forward and start to render the building. So with that, I'm going to walk through quite a few exterior materials that are typically used in school construction in the Northeast, and materials that we're comfortable saying, yes, this could work on your building for these reasons. Some of the criteria that we evaluate against is durability, cost, maintenance, life cycle. So as you hear about some of these materials, those are some of the factors that we can talk about. And one thing that we are specifically focused on in this particular project is how this will sustain the salt water and the coastal environment in which Revere can, the buildings can take a beating depending on the materials. So we are extra focused on that, and we'll speak to some of that tonight. So with that, I'm going to start with some of the durable bases that we often are able to include in some of our school design. And with that, we've got your traditional brick, we've got fieldstone, and then CMU concrete masonry units that you might see around in multiple building types. A lot of these have all of them, high durability, right? Like these are the things that you can put a snow shovel up against, you can have snow up against, and it, these will withstand lots of the New England weather that we have, and also withstand the salt water specific to the Revere climate in which we're talking about. So all of them are strong, durable, they have, they wear well, they have long life cycles, 50 to 75 years, which, you know, and beyond. And there are plenty of brick buildings in New England that have been around for much longer than 75 years. So they do need some maintenance, and you'll see that all of them are sort of deemed medium. And for what it's worth, we're like high, medium, low as it relates to durability and maintenance, just as a litmus test. So the maintenance on all of these is pretty much medium. Periodic resealing, you might have to repoint, but a lot of these have very similar maintenance requirements. But you can see that the costs are a little different. The brick and CMU run anywhere from, in the example of brick, $35 to $50 a square foot. Depending, there's, you know, different size bricks, different color bricks. I'm going to show some examples. You all know what brick looks like, or you should. And, you know, sometimes people feel strongly about one type of brick over another. So we show a range of costs. The Fieldstone, obviously, quite higher, $90 to $110 a square foot, depending on where you get it, how it's cut in the field, how, you know, are they hand cutting it, are they laying it, and having to piece together like a puzzle. And then lastly, CMU. CMU is larger, so therefore it's heavier, but that also means there are fewer units. So the cost of this typically ends up being $30 to $40 a square foot, and it depends. There's different types of CMU. There's basic CMU, there's ground face, there's split faced, there's different colors. So again, lots of options on these. But as we talk about the material itself, I'd love to get feedback. So I'm going to show some examples of brick. Like I said, most of us should know what brick looks like, feels like. There's different types of brick. Red brick, this is iron spot, which is kind of unique. It's dark and can be sort of shiny. We've got brick patterning. You just use different variations of the same color that you can see here. This is all the same information from the previous slide, so there's nothing new here. And then I'm going to show a few examples. This is Charter Oak International. So this has different color bricks, variation in the brick, and then a different color within the window pattern. So you can see that this is sort of closer to a traditional brick looking building. We've got kind of a beige or variation of beige, multi-story brick building. This looks like 4 stories. This is Dunbar High School in DC. So this could give you a flavor of what a brick, you know, the body of the facade could look like. This is Iron Spot, which I just mentioned. It's kind of a darker brick, but heavier. We have a 5-story building plus parking under. So we're going to be running up against scale issues, and we'll definitely want a palette of multiple materials. So as you think about what you like together or separate, this has some wood. I'll get to that in a moment. But, you know, as you start to think about what the building wants to look and feel like, and as we move towards decisions or wanting to look at options, we will show some of that on the building itself for you to see examples of and what the Revere High School could look like. So this is stone. Again, Fieldstone, the highest cost of the masonry units that I spoke about. These are some examples of it being used for piers and the base of the building under some brick. In this particular case, this has a piece of brick that is under some wood. Piece of building piece that is stone under wood. So it starts to give a little bit of texture, a little color variation. Sometimes you can get that out of a split face CMU, but it's not as randomized. Those units are always traditionally the same size. So just something to think about aesthetically. And here are some examples of stone being used for pieces of the building. In this case, the full height of this particular piece, but then just the base and piers for the multi-story piece of this particular building. And then another example, College of William and Mary. This is actually an EYP project, but a very nice facade of stone where they used it strategically and then likely, you know, chose a different material for the body of the building. But it gives a little bit of interest. We've done this in multiple projects where a piece of it is the Fieldstone, something that's valuable and wants to be durable and interesting to look at, but not necessarily from a cost standpoint wise to use throughout the building. And then CMU. And like I said, some of the CMU, there's variations on size, color, not so much shape. But this is our North Haven Middle School project. You don't see often entire buildings of school used as in CMU, but often base, and sometimes in this case, some variation that takes you up the full 1 story. Again, it's cost effective, it's durable, it withstands New England weather. So obviously economically a wise choice, and you can do some interesting things with it. So I wouldn't dismiss it. There's definitely places where CMU is often a wise choice. So with that, those are often some of the materials we use at the lower parts of our building. Again, like they can withstand weather and rain, water. They're basically a very durable material that a student can bang a backpack up against or hit with something, whether it's accidental or on purpose, and it can withstand that. Up higher, we often choose to do something a little different. Sometimes it's more economical, not always, but materials that either have a different aesthetic or can break down the scale. And again, we're a quite tall building. Not that it's out of context here in Revere, but for a school, we want to sometimes break down the scale, just the sheer size of this building, the length of it and the height of it. We'll definitely want to break that scale down. So sometimes we use corrugated metal. In this case, it's not something we feel is a wise choice for Revere with the salt water and the connections that are required, the backing for the metal, as well as the actual aluminum itself. Internally as a team, we just believe this would not be a material that would withstand the climate in Revere, and it's also got a fairly low life cycle. It can be damaged quite easily, throw something hard at it. So this we're not going to recommend in this case, but wanted to let you know it's something we considered, just so that we can say there are all sorts of materials out there. We just don't think all of them are right for your particular project. We have phenolic and fiber cement. These often look really similar. Phenolic panels have a very durable, high density backing that makes them very durable. So they're up in the high. And then the fiber cement has a similar look and feel in that it's a rain screen. It's got joints. You have panels that can be up to a certain size, but they are only a medium durability. These tend to be more, I guess brittle is the right word. They can definitely be damaged. And in this case, we would say that we would only recommend it as a through color, in that if it were to get nicked or damaged in any way, that you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell, because sometimes it's like a tile. If it's not a through color and it gets chipped, you can see the damage. So the cost here, 55 to 75, is fairly modest, in the range of some of the masonry that we showed. Phenolic has seemed to creep up in doing our updates to cost. And as everyone knows, COVID's affecting everything in supply chains as well. The estimated cost has gone up in this, but the durability of this and the ability to withstand the salt water and the winds and the climate that are particular to Revere, we feel like it could be a good choice, or maybe used strategically. And both of these have a low maintenance rating, so they're pretty easy to maintain. They wouldn't have closed joints. They'd be open joint, rain screen, and 40 years on the fiber cement and 50 on the phenolic. If you don't know what these look like, you've probably seen buildings around that that have this. So again, that information is the same on the slides. I don't want anyone to think I'm moving ahead without reading the words. So that's the same information. Our Essex Tech school is mostly phenolic with a split face CMU, just for reference. You can start to see some of the texture. Here, there is a fieldstone seat that gets in the front view there. But this is phenolic, very durable, and at the time was quite cost effective. Costs have creeped up a bit, but a strong option for you guys. And then here's the fiber cement. And You can do many things with panel sizes and jointing and color variations. There's a lot of options you can do here. And at this price point, it's a pretty nice option. Again, so long as it's through color. This looks to have a brick base just for reference. So you can start to see where we're headed. Like a lot of the first durable options you often see on bases of buildings with panel systems above. You can see the pattern here. And then lastly, a couple options that are a little bit different than what you might otherwise see. But there's cedar panels. Cedar does quite well in coastal environments, and we otherwise wouldn't so much recommend it, but it should be left natural and it changes color over time. The cost is in line with a lot of the other materials that we typically use, as well as the life cycle. So again, the maintenance, we wouldn't recommend if this were to be used that you would go paint it as an example, but just let it be in its natural state and change over time. And there's something nice about that, or maybe a piece of the building. You know, we talked about that auditorium piece being like a jewel or a gem on the corner. Maybe this is a nice place where cedar can be used strategically. Alongside cedar, ACM, which is aluminum composite materials. This is something you might often see on like a soffit or at the cap of a building, something that is quite durable, medium to high, so long as you have a high level finish. A lot of times you can create weather tight complex shapes. So aluminum composite material, ACM, is typically used in unique soffits. We probably have already seen it used in some of these examples, and I just didn't point it out. It does sort of have a lower life cycle, but the maintenance is quite low. And you typically want to use it up high because while it is fairly thick, it's thicker than the metal siding we didn't recommend. It can be damaged. So often this is used, again, higher than a durable base. And I'll show some examples of these as well. So you can see cedar panels, it's not like a cedar shake, what you'd see on Cape Cod as an example, or maybe even some of the capes and houses in Revere. But we'd suggest more of a panelized system and something that's like either vertical or horizontal and used in a panelized manner. And here's Sidwell Friends. This is in DC, and this is a school that's quite sustainable, actually, if anyone's interested in reading up on this particular project. We did some really cool and unique things there. And then lastly, the ACM examples. So you don't often see a full facade. I have a couple examples where it's quite, I had to look pretty hard to find examples where it was like a true facade of ACM, but they're out there. You know, this is an example where you can see these panels. And you can use quite large panels in one direction. Usually one direction is sort of fixed at a maximum and the other can be quite long. And here's an example with just the blue, obviously. We've got brick and glass to complete the palette here, but there's all sorts of colors. Any you know, PPG color you pick out there, you can get it made in ACM. So lots of options if you wanted to put some of this material as an accent anywhere. So with that, I'm going to pause before we go to the site design and offer if anyone has any thoughts or strong feelings. I don't know if anyone has maintenance experience. A lot of your schools likely have a lot of these materials. Maybe you have a good experience, bad experience. Anything that you want to bring to the table as a please use it or please don't, or I really love it or I really don't, or I'm curious what this could look like on our building. So could you show some scenarios where we might, you know, what this might look like? So I'm going to stop sharing. I'll share if anyone wants to go back to anything, but I like to see people when they have comments. So I'm going to go back to the screen where I can see everyone and ask if anyone has anything to bring to the table. By all means.
I'll just mention that I noticed on one of the later options that it was only a 25-year lifespan, and that doesn't sound too helpful.
Yeah, so that's the ACM. I think that part of that has to do with how it's maintained. I don't know, Dan, do you have any more insight on why that's so low? Honestly, ACM's been around on buildings forever and a day. I think it's just listed as, go ahead, Dan, but did you have something to say, Dan?
I think it can last longer than that. And it depends on the colors you choose and the way it's installed. I mean, sometimes when you pick a bright color like that blue, that may fade over time and chalk and not look good in 25 years. But a silver or some color or an anodized may look perfectly fine in 25 years. So we try to look for a range for those lifespans. It's not as though it's going to fall off the building in 25 years. It's just a matter of we're looking for what's great, how long, like a brick, as Dawn said, like 75, maybe we may be under, considering there's buildings that are 300 years old that or more, we may be undershooting quite a bit on brick.
I guess I should add a plus to the 75.
Yeah.
I recognize.
Plus or
that.
minus on all of them, really.
Yeah, to Dan's point, they're not just gonna fall off the building at that time, but they may need more maintenance, or they may need panels replaced, that sort of thing, so. But that's a good point, Diane.
I noticed
there any-
Stacy has her hand up, so I just want to say that.
No big deal. I just, my preference is the cedar, and I would love to see more with the cedar. But I also have always admired the Essex Tech one.
Oh, the phenolic, yeah.
That's
Is that-
phenomenal, yeah.
It's hard to, I should have done a close-up of that, and maybe I did on the actual image of it, but that's actually a wood look. It's the way that
Right.
they make the panels, there's like a veneer that's put onto it, and that particular one, it's a wood look veneer. So you can get that same sort of wood, soft, natural element, but in a very durable material.
Yeah, it has a very classy look to it because of
And
the
that
wood
has-
look.
Yeah, thank you. That's the wood look. It's almost like a cedar looking wood, if you're like a reddish wood. And that also has the ACM. Let me go back. Let me share again.
Does have ACM in too.
It's got ACM on the underside, like the overhangs. Here it is. It's actually, I have two pictures of it. So this is all that the ACM, I was saying sometimes, the entire palette includes multiple. So we've
That's your
got,
large complex shape.
yeah, because it comes back and then there's quite a bit of over. Forget if it's a 6-foot overhang on this particular. That feels like a million years ago we designed this building. So this whole, that's just an aluminum roof edge, but then you have ACM that comes over, down, and back to the building. And so these are the phenolic wood look panels, and then this is a split face, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And then here it is from afar. So again, you have the ACM on these large overhangs, complex pieces along the front. This was that overhang. You can't quite tell, but because this is in shadow, it's like a 6-foot setback, something like that. Great.
And of
Thank you.
course, I like the more pricier.
Yeah, well,
Product.
it used to be
Don't we
like
all?
55-ish. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I couldn't believe when we got our updated pricing and, yeah, so it's quite a bit different than it was in, when was that? 2010, 2012, we designed and had that building built. So great. Thank you, Stacy. Rich Biscay, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any benefit to any of those materials with regard to repairs as opposed to just lifespan. Like if something blew off the building or something, crashed into the building, are there any benefits to one material over another?
Yeah, I mean, brick, all the masonry units can be replaced in their smallest units, right? Like if a piece gets damaged, if whatever, like some sort of mechanical, like, a snowblower or something runs into, the base of the building and some bricks.
No,
or some damage.
I was thinking more in terms of the panels, not so much
Panels,
the
yeah,
bricks.
so
They can be.
Yep,
Yeah,
so
they can
the-
be. And the other thing I think we would probably really suggest here is to affix them to the building with stainless steel screws that are that are exposed, so that you would be able to basically unscrew them and replace the panel if you need to, because the exposed fasteners are less expensive. And in many cases, like that Essex Tech picture Dawn showed, that's actually exposed
Okay.
fasteners, but those fasteners are finished to match the panel. But in your environment, I would be hesitant because of the corrosion.
Yeah, so what I was trying to
to
zoom in
do
on
that.
here, Dan is describing, is there's, for each of these panels, there's at least 6 or 8 fasteners, face fasteners as opposed to hidden. So each of those, you just go in with your, your tool, and you need something to lift you up. Obviously, the higher panels will all need that. And they can literally, you just take the fasteners off, and then you have to order a replacement panel for it. But with the stainless steel exposed fasteners that Dan's describing, that we feel, we've internally had these discussions about, if they were to use this material, what's the best way to do it? In this case, definitely stainless steel, as well as the metal behind it, right, Dan? We talked about the green dirt and
Yeah.
some of the materials that are going to be, because it's a rain screen, so water can physically get behind these panels, and it's intended to be so. So we need to be really careful with the types of metals that we're using here. But stainless steel face fastened will allow you to just take the fasteners off, replace the panels. So in this case, Rich, to go back to answer your question, both of these phenolic and fiber cement have exposed face fastened fasteners. The cedar, Dan, I guess it would depend on how we designed it.
Yeah,
If it's,
any of it can be. I think the pictures that you're showing are not. Those are hidden clip system, but any of them can be face fastened. And I think in your case, in most cases, what we do is we do face fasten them.
does that answer your question, Rich?
Yes, like I said, just trying to think about more of the maintenance as opposed to just the lifespan, but thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
And just quickly, Perkins Eastman team, I do think I'm curious on you guys doing a little research on the aluminum panel based on impact resistance. And I'm talking like little stuff, but knowing there's going to be a lot of storms, branches blowing around, hail, etc. I know all the other materials you said I don't have a concern with that but I would be curious about what people experience with that sort of impact situation based on storms for the aluminum system.
Yeah. Good point, Brian. And we will consider that. I don't think we were expecting that it would be the full facade, but that it would be used up at the roof edges, similar to how we've used it in the past. So do you still foresee, well, we can talk about it more, Brian, and definitely in the exterior material, the subgroup. These are great topics to dive deeper into. Good. Was there another hand?
I think Michael had his hand up.
Yeah. Did your question get answered?
Yeah, I was basically asking what Rich was asking, but
Oh, okay.
while I'm talking now, when I'm looking at those cedar planks, are they really just for like design almost, because it looked like they were covering the windows?
Some of them do.
They're doing
In
on
that
purpose
case,
for that?
they are.
Or is it
In
like
that case, they're acting
natural
as window
shade?
shading devices. Yeah,
Okay.
in that particular design, that's what they're doing.
but they
So
can be
that
for the facade
facade,
also?
they can do that as well.
Yeah, I'll go back just so everyone sees what.
Yeah,
I
that's
really
what it
like the
is
look of the
doing
cedar, and I think it's a great idea for like being at the beach
I'm going the
too.
wrong way.
there.
Sorry.
It does really well in the salt water, in a coastal environment, that material.
So this and this, you can
Yeah, that
see.
right
here
there.
that-
That's what that
So
is. Yep.
My guess is that's maybe east or west facing, and
Right.
this is south. See how these have a horizontal overhang?
Mhm.
Typically in south facing, you would want to shade the angle of the sun directly, but east-west, as it moves throughout the day, you typically vertically would shade it from a sustainability and controlling glare standpoint. So I think they just had different fenestration on covering the windows on this particular project. But here you can see a lot of the cedar just in a vertical plank without any sort of coverage on the windows, Michael. So depending on what it's covering and if there are openings in which direction it's facing, whether it's east-west or north-south. There may be a little bit of differentiation based on those elements.
All right, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I like that cedar idea too. I want to see if we can all as a group hunt down some examples of just what it looks like aesthetically as it ages out, just to provide some reference point.
Yeah.
We
It
can
does
try that.
change color over time.
As would be expected. I'd assume
Yeah.
it sort of grays out over time, but I think it could still look great, but just setting expectations, I think that'd be a good box for us to check.
Yeah, yeah. And if we decide to go down that route and end up doing some renderings, we can do a kind of before it ages and after it ages rendering, so we can get a sense for that. Yep.
Doesn't take long.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Doesn't take long.
No, so the after is more likely the long term.
Yeah, you're gonna see the after a lot longer than you'll see the not after, right?
Anyone else? Love, hate, worried, not worried?
This is James. I'm looking, if you don't mind going back to the phenolic panels and
Okay.
looking at the image on the left where there are different shades, or how do you want to describe that? And I guess Brian was saying managing expectations. How hard is it to get a uniform? Was that on purpose that they were
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
this
that's
color,
on
but however
purpose.
you want to say that? Okay. So
Yeah.
you have control.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You have a lot of control with there's a couple of companies like Trespa, for example, and Thundermax. Those are kind of the leaders of this. And they use very much like a countertop or a laminate manufacturing kind of sheet is how they make it. So that sheet is very stable and very much the same every single time. There's another company that does a natural wood impregnation into a phenolic panel. I forget the name escapes me, but those can have variation. But these usually have very little to no discernible variation in panel. That design that is on the left here is specifically like that as part of the design.
Yep, that's our Banneker project, and that was
Yeah,
intentional.
but Essex Tech is that's one uniform color.
Yeah, and it shows that, so that's good.
Yep. I was just going to go to this one and say you can.
Those
do
are
the
different
same-
colors.
Yep,
Yep.
with fiber cement. It's our MLK project, and just picking two tones of an off-white almondy. And same here with some of the verticality, just a slight tint differentiation or a slight tone differentiation. You can get some textures and variation that would otherwise just be a flat surface. And again, that's kind of preference, and if folks feel strongly about it or not. There are many different ways to fenestrate the building. So, and we can look at if we were to go down the road of either of these panelized systems, we can look at a lot of different options with the jointing and the size of the panels, et cetera, color.
And I think I had one more follow-up with the cedar. It made me harken back to the and I don't know if you have it on hand, the site section where we were showing, where the seagrass, I don't know what you want to call that.
Oh yeah,
But I can see a theme, going there. Continuing
yeah,
that
that's a
theme.
good point. I don't have that particular presentation open, but yeah, the one where we cut the section to see the vertical change, and we are kind of trying to shield some of the roadway from the pedestrian walks.
Right.
Yeah, Dawn and I had talked about that earlier, that the cedar could certainly work its way throughout the site as being an appropriate material near the water like that.
Right.
And if you remember, James, in that same section, I do wish I had it open. We had some variation in the grade and kind of held back the differentiation with some of those stone jetties that we used examples of. So again, like you could strategically work in some of the natural stone, and it doesn't have to be like the field stone. It could be like a more of like a coastal stone look, if that were desired, to start to weave in some of the natural landscape and the relationship to the ocean and proximity into some of the architecture and landscape materials. So just something to think about. Michael, I see your hand again.
Back up, yep. I was just wondering if any, like, I don't know if you guys know, but maybe the Revere people would know if the Hill School has similar panels. And I was wondering if we knew which panels those were. Especially like around the gymnasium, I believe.
I
I
can find
don't,
out. I'm not sure we know, but I can look into it.
yeah, I was
Okay.
just Googling while we're,
Just
Sitting
almost
here.
Yeah,
like
let me,
an
let me
example, like
Google
when
it.
we'll walk by.
that looks like ACM. I'm just on their homepage, hill.revereK12.org, and it's scrolling
Yeah, I
through
don't,
photos.
I don't think it's phenolic, but I could be wrong. But
Looks
yeah,
like
we can
ACM.
check out that.
Like brick with ACM, if I'm,
Yep,
That-
that's what it looks like.
I believe those panels are like a ceramic material. They're like a,
That too.
like a baked, hard clay type of material,
oh, terracotta?
sort of like that, yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, they're not metal. I mean, I know exactly what they are, I just don't know what they consist of. And then they're not a metal and they're not a, true phenolic. It's something that would look like it was baked to be made.
Oh, are you talking about what's on the academic wing versus the gym? The gym definitely looks like ACM. But I see the academic, the more almond off-white
Right,
color.
Yeah, yeah.
That almond looks like terracotta panel.
Terracotta. Wow. Yeah, that looks like terracotta. And then the gym, the upper part of the gym above the brick definitely looks like ACM. It actually has a really similar profile to that Essex.
Do you want to
Mhm.
share the picture, Dawn, so people can see what you're referring to?
Sure.
might be helpful.
Let me see. It's scrolling through. So this okay, so this is ACM, this gray,
ACM.
and this almond. Yeah, so
That looks like terracotta.
ACM, and then obviously brick. And then this looks
Yep.
like a different color ACM, the white. Yeah, so. Now we're looking at interior. But.
So
It kinda
Diane,
looks
we
like
only
the
have
top.
20 years left.
Yeah, right. It's gonna start falling. No, I'm kidding.
That-
Yes, it's gonna
Yeah,
fall off the building in
ACM.
20 years, Stacy.
That's right. I had a comment to add in. I know everyone was talking about in favor of the cedar. I kind of favor the phenolic panels better. I know we're on the beach and we're thinking beach theme, but I'm thinking more like the modern Riviera with like the new Riviera Beach and you know what I mean? The hotels and the apartments and
Mhm.
fitting into that theme. I
Yeah.
think the phenolic, how do I say it? Phenolic
Phenolic.
panels. Thank you. Fit better into the theme that's currently being built down the beach versus, seagrass and cedar, which I love the cedar, but
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of like the looks of it when I saw the big scale buildings.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a lot. It
yeah,
was-
and I think if we were to propose it, to be honest with you, Susan, I think we would strategically use it, not like wholesale like they did on the.
That was a
face.
lot.
Yes,
Yeah.
small area.
I think what I'm
Yeah.
saying is I agree with you. And,
As an accent maybe, but not as the whole
Yeah.
building.
It doesn't lend itself to a large scale panel
Mm,
because it like a phenolic, you can get an 8-foot by 4-foot panel, a
mm,
big piece. But a cedar doesn't lend itself very well to that.
mm. So that was just my comment and input on like what I liked looking at the pictures that you showed us. And the materials and the durability, of course, being on the ocean, we have to think of that. We need the longest lifespan that we can. But I'm thinking more like that modern sleeker look that fits in with the new design of Riviera Beach.
Great. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that comment.
Just one quick side note on those phenolic panels. I mean, those things are nearly as bulletproof as you can get. There, one of the companies Dan mentioned, Trespa. I mean, I've worked on projects where that same material was used as a countertop in labs. So I mean, wet labs, chem labs. So I mean, it's sort of similar. It's used in place of epoxy in some interiors. So that stuff is very durable.
Yes.
And
Yep.
non-flammable.
Correct.
Yes.
It is.
Correct.
Yep.
It is
We've had
extremely
it
durable.
tested.
We
Did
have.
he say not flammable? That's what you
Correct.
said, right, Carl?
Yeah.
It's not built out of wood.
So I also have to say where Susan liked the modern look, that won't be the modern look in 10 to 20 years. And a lot of us down living on the beach and talking about the condos and apartment buildings, we were saying how ugly they're going to look in about 20 years. And this was just a conversation at a condo meeting about 2 days ago.
Well, I think that we have a lot of time before we have to make final decisions on this stuff.
Mhm.
And I think we're gonna have to manage a whole lot of different opinions and aesthetics and somehow we'll figure that all out.
That's my
Well, there
job.
were certain materials that were not discussed at all. So,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
But you're right,
inevitably, it's
there's-
gonna be a combination as Don was sort of
Yes.
presenting. We're probably gonna
Yeah.
have 3, 4, or 5 of these materials, and the question's gonna be, how do you want to dial them in? What do you want as a production area? What do we want as a feature area, et cetera?
Yeah,
Yeah, and we're happy to take a stab at that, and obviously we will. I just didn't want to go into it without any sort of feedback just on the materiality and durability and maintenance of it, and have take a stab at something, spend time on it, and have you guys say, no, we have that on another school, that's not going to work, or we don't like it. So this is all really valuable feedback and allows us to then take it and bring some, proposed scenarios to you to get
and make
again, to
everybody
get-
happy.
Yeah. I've stopped trying to make everyone happy. In my job, it's always a balance of making the right decision for that building, which is exactly what we will do for you guys. So, all right, good. Is there anything else before we move on to the site? No, awesome. I look forward to continuing that conversation. Thank you for all your feedback tonight. And I guess David Warner's here with Warner Larson. I will share my screen, David. And if you just want to ask me to forward slides as you need them forwarded. I think Dan's gonna do a little preface and set the stage.
just
So-
like a minute's worth. So last time we met, we talked about some of the complexities and constraints that may exist on this site. And as we've continued to meet as a site working group and learn more and think about this site more, we've started to think about the potential for what this might look like if we take the whole site, and how might that all look, because there are some other program elements that we understand the city may want to include here at some point, one being the MBTA station and another being a potential future municipal use. So David's started to take kind of a look at that, and he's going to run you through a couple of options of what that might look like, taking the whole site and keeping the Eastern County ditch, which is the ECD, as I understand as it's called, and and how that all might work with the fields and everything else that we would like to have on this site.
Thank you, Dan. Just testing my volume. Everybody can hear me okay, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, I think we've had 4 meetings with the site subcommittee over the past month, and there's really been a lot of good information shared. We've gotten our hands on the more recent survey that was done for this parcel, I think in 2018. So it's much more accurate than the information we had been working with previously. And also the city has shared with us their flown survey data. I think the ground survey information that we got, though, from 2018 is probably the most accurate that we have. And it's really good that we have that level of precision to be looking at now as we get into the nitty gritty of the site design. We have, and as Dan said, we're looking at the entire site. These are all diagrams to show what if the city were to take the entire site. And there are other implications associated with that I don't know if Brian Dakin will want to weigh in at all, but we're looking at it purely just from a site planning perspective. I want to give credit to, the site subcommittee has included multiple consultants, and Niche Engineering, I don't believe, is on the call tonight, but I'm the spokesperson for a lot of people who have been doing a lot of good work on this. Our office at Warner Larson includes people that are also on this call. Amy and Ty have joined. So we're going to show you the 4 different diagrams of thought process now that has evolved forward from the site plan that you saw previously that was limited to about 20 acres or so on the left portion of the site. If you notice now, the driveway coming in right above the word overall, That's directly across from the Wonderland T station and parking garage. That was really the dividing line. Everything to the right is now what we're considering as the rest of the site, if you will. And I think some of the other considerations that we've learned about in the past month are exactly how the existing utilities and drainage run through the site, what needs to be preserved. There's a lot of infrastructure in the site that conveys both stormwater and sewer from the adjacent communities through the site and off the site that have cost implications to relocating if we have to relocate them. And so we're gonna layer in that information as we get it from niche engineering. We don't have that in the diagrams here, but we know where it is, and we know that these diagrams that we're showing are intended to minimize the changes to the infrastructure. But there will be changes. The most important one is the Eastern County Ditch, I think it's the most important one anyway, because in terms of the potential time and cost implications if we were to relocate that. And that's that kind of bluish green dashed line that runs diagonally and separates the upper triangle from the lower majority of the site. Just to start to understand these 4 diagrams, I'm going to go through the legend very briefly. The site boundary definitely shows you the entire site. Stormwater, the Eastern County Ditch I just pointed to. The other elements as far as colored use areas, one of the things that we're realizing is that any fill that we're doing on the site, because it's in a floodplain, is going to need what's called compensatory storage. So what you're placing in terms of volume for fill will have to be excavated out at a similar elevation elsewhere on the site. So we're showing a lot more of basins and flood management on here in these diagrams than the previous site plan that you had seen, just to reflect that reality. The next step that we're going to be doing with regard to that is taking the contouring that we're developing and actually doing that volumetric calc to see where we're at relative to these designs and how much more alteration we might have to do. But one of the things that's very real to us is the fact that we're going to have to dedicate a fair amount of the square footage of this parcel to flood mitigation. We don't know exactly how much in terms of area or depth, but we're showing these areas around the site because we want to make sure that we're balancing things out, and we have the opportunity to do so as we get those volume calculations back. So the other program elements around the building are largely similar to what you've seen before, and I'm going to go through those in more detail when we get to the final slide, where you see that in a more illustrative fashion. These are really use diagrams that help you focus on the pieces of program and where they go on the site to help you understand what is a preferred configuration. But what contrasts the stormwater storage in blue are the earthwork berms in green. We've got a few of those. And I know Dawn was making reference to the berm elevation to help mitigate the traffic and the views from the Parkway and North Shore Drive into the site, but also to elevate the landscape so that the landscape is more prominent, more visible. I know Dr. Kelly commented on the beauty of what was conveyed at the last meeting relative to the campus feel, the greenscape. And one of the ways to do that is to elevate strategic portions of the land so that it becomes more visible. The biggest change that you can see here programmatically is that we have the 2 fields. I know we've been working with 2 synthetic turf, 2 fields, but we've also been realizing when we were confined to not taking the whole site, that second field was becoming unlikely to be able to accomplish that because of the other environmental considerations and flood mitigation. So that's one of the benefits, I think, in terms of taking the entire site, in addition to having that future municipal use, is that you're definitely going to be able to do the 2 fields on here. And that was another point that I know Dr. Kelly had reiterated as essential. Like, that's the fundamental aspect of choosing the Wonderland site, is getting the program necessary for the new high school. The car and bus circulation we're showing diagrammatically with blue and red arrows. What we're doing is we're designing those driveways to be interchangeable. And this is something that I think I've only pointed out in the site subcommittee meeting, but I think it's an important thing to understand at the building committee level as well, because how the site is used in the future can change. in terms of traffic volumes and what we have seen over the years that many times administration will think of different ways to run the cars, run the buses through the campus. And so we're designing those to be interchangeable. We're showing them, I think, in probably a preferred circulation path right now. One thing I'd just point out is that the cars, when they leave the primary loop, they could also turn right and exit out down across from the 99 restaurant. And I know what we just simply have to do is have like a curb divider in there. So the buses, when they're close to the school, could allow the cars to drive past them. And I know that that's an important consideration in terms of minimizing the through traffic in the rotary. But those are all elements that can be incorporated in here. So with that introduction relative to the program elements and general site circulation, I want to talk about the 4 options that we're showing and how they're different. So we're dedicating quite a lot of space on the upper side, which is really more west, but plan north here to flood mitigation. We know that the sewer line that comes down Dunn Road has to continue through and exit out to the far left corner of the site. That pathway, Dawn, is that orange line is pedestrian circulation, which we definitely want to encourage and maintain, because that's a surface connection that you already have through residential neighborhoods that ultimately connect back over to the center of the city. But that field is in an area right now that is probably around elevation 3 or 4. And I'll get into elevations, I think, on the final slide, but the main difference with this plan is keeping the ditch unchanged and putting the field in close proximity to the school building, close proximity to the other field, where you can have the shared parking, close and adjacent to it. And this one also preserves the largest corner piece for the future municipal use directly across from the Wonderland T station. Let's go to the next slide. And the main difference with this is saying, what if we needed more space for flood mitigation? We don't know exactly how much space we need yet. And what if that field were to move over to close, up against North Shore Drive? And what would we be left with for this future municipal use? It's a triangular shaped piece of land, very likely could support, a municipal use like a fire station or something like that. And it still has pretty direct connection out to the main road. But everything else that you see on this plan, for the most part, is unchanged. We aren't showing parking going across the drainage ditch. That's another difference. This one, I guess, if I was to name it, it would be to max out the flood mitigation, kind of worst case scenario in terms of how are we going to deal with, addressing the future flooding potential at the site.
Hey, David.
Yes.
James here. I just want to make a quick point as I'm looking through this. Would the flood mitigation that you're showing is not unique to the use of it being a school? Is that fair to say? In other words, if anybody puts anything on the site, if the current existing owners wanted to put something, they're going to have to deal with the same issues that we're dealing with right now, and
That's
having
correct.
to
That's correct.
use up all of this land themselves for flood mitigation. They wouldn't be able to build house upon house upon house.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the considerations that we're thinking about are fill is a lot cheaper than building elevated structure, for sure. And so roadways, for instance, coming in at elevation 7, right across from Wonderland T Station, instead of dropping down to existing grade, which starts to drop down pretty quickly, it drops down 6, 7, 5. By the time you get to where the cursor is now, it's down close to elevation 4. But our intent with the grading design here is to not go below, well, basically use elevation 7 along the North Shore Drive as a control point, saying, as long as you can get access to the site from there, we should be able to get access to the building from there. So keeping that driveway at elevation 7 or above means there's going to be fill. But if we then, and that fill needs to be mitigated from a compensatory storage standpoint, one way to minimize that further is to build that whole driveway kind of like an elevated causeway, like you're going to a beach. But of course, having a driveway on structure is significantly more expensive. And understanding the poor soils beneath the ground makes structural support for that driveway even more expensive. So I think it's safe to say, you know, let's reserve large areas of the site for addressing flood mitigation so that we have options, we have choices where we don't have to revert to the most expensive design solution for elevated driveways and parking areas. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Let's go to option 3.
David, can I ask a question? This is Michael Picardi. Those flood mitigation places that you have on the map, what do they look like when you're there? Is it just grass? Is it?
Yeah, we're thinking of these as natural, kind of like they'd be more like indicative of the marsh type ecology. There would be places where, so you see the dotted dashed line going through there, that could be a boardwalk for the pedestrian and bicycle connection. If it needed to be something, well, actually, then the dashed line, the larger dashed line, that would have to be maintained at the current grade, because that's where the sewer line goes. There's a gravity sewer that comes down Dunn Road that goes all the way out, and we'll have to relocate it around the new building footprint, and it exits out the site kind of off that curved end where it goes underneath the railroad tracks. Yeah, so it exits out over there, but that could be used as an emergency access, you know, because it's going to be elevated anyway, and you could have kind of this marshy vegetated landscape where floodwaters can ebb and flow from.
Thank you.
It's not underwater, if that was the question. Michael.
No, it's more of like if it's going to be able to be usable, but it won't be really.
Not really.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be a beautiful biology lab for your students. It'll have a boardwalk through it. It will not be a typical usable like as a field or for overflow parking or things like that now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's go to option 3. And so I know Dan introduced the idea, and we've heard about this in our site subcommittee working sessions, that the MBTA Amtrak is planning on some type of they want to put a train station somewhere along the line in this general vicinity. And so where would it make sense? Of course, it has to be track adjacent, and we're very tight around the building, of course. So we also were thinking about connections to roadway and pedestrian infrastructure. This is a really nice direct link across to Wonderland T Station. And so that seemed like a good location. It happens to be in one of the lowest points in the site. From a developability standpoint, and you know, it's got its challenges, and you know, the MBTA Amtrak might be looking at other places up or down the line that have higher ground that might make more sense. But we showed it there because from a site use standpoint, or at least the site spatial diagram, it fits, it's adjacent, has good connections, and you know, it could be addressed, you know, if they've got enough money, I guess, from a developability standpoint to put it there. And we chose to use the option 2 slide to add that to, because that one had the most flood mitigation area that potentially could be scaled back from. And if you notice a common theme here, all 3 of these options are not modifying the Eastern County drainage ditch. And which we think is an important consideration at this point, if we don't have to, just because we know from the engineers and the permitting consultant that there will be time and cost implications associated with doing that, with potentially limited benefit. But so you see down in the right corner, you know, that's where we're showing the field. It's not the ideal adjacency to the school building, but there's still the opportunity for a future municipal use. So let's go to option 4. And what this now does, it takes option 3 and says, okay, if there's an MBTA station and they want to put a parking garage there, direct, adjacent to that, would that work? And it's basically based on the understanding that the existing Wonderland garage we've been told, is at capacity a large part of the time. And that this station would likely have commuters going to it and need a place to park. And so we showed a footprint that has the same top to bottom dimension, which is basically 3 bays of double loaded cars. It's not designed at all. It's just saying, okay, look, this is a footprint that could work for parking. The study that we've shown, and I'll get into this on the next slide, but we are showing structured parking for the high school as part of our early planning in the other opposite corner of the site, has a similar footprint. And our calculations based on that, if it were say 4 stories, you could fit about 600 cars in it. So we don't know what the program is for MBTA. We were looking at, spatially what could fit. And so this is intended to just diagrammatically show where a station and where parking could go and its connections to the rest of the city infrastructure. In doing so, we could have left the field down by North Shore Drive. And I think this is somewhat mutually exclusive, this change that we're showing with the field moving up closer to the building. If as part of all of this infrastructure that we're talking about, this additional infrastructure, there are resources and time available to reconfigure the Eastern County drainage ditch or culvert it and make that land closer to the building more usable, the field would fit there. And that adjacency of that field to the building is certainly much better. So let's go to the next slide.
Can I actually ask a question, David, before we do?
Sure. Yeah.
Is this intended to be a roadway that one accesses the MBTA parking, or is it off of this road? I'm just trying to understand the campus approach versus the public, everyday commuter approach as it impacts our building and our campus, right?
That's definitely intended to be a roadway, Dawn, and there have not been any. There has not been any traffic analysis relative to trips per day and time of day. I think there could be potentially some significant conflicts with a T-shaped intersection at that second left turn into the site, where cars coming and going from the parking garage out to North Shore Drive. I think the route from Dunn Road is circuitous. It goes through, a small residential neighborhood before it gets up to Revere Street. And, but cars would have the option, I suppose, to go either way. Whereas it's a space planning exercise. It's really not a recommendation by any means. And I do think that when you're thinking about transportation infrastructure, certainly the MBTA would be looking for things that would have long-term sustainable solutions. And there's higher ground off the site in relatively close proximity to this vicinity. So I think that this might be an academic study to show spatially what could work. But if it does tend to get any traction, there would have to be traffic analysis to see trip per day and time of day and where the conflicts with the school program, that might be a deal killer in and of itself.
Yeah, and just jumping in real quick, I just want to just a couple quick high level points is we will be doing whatever we can to work with the team that comes together for this train station. And I think the places that you're seeing it on these diagrams, at least based on, I think my and some other people on the team's feeling now, are probably the least beneficial places to put it. There are places off of this site, either one property up towards Bell Circle, or potentially on the other side of the track, a right of way between the Comfort Inn and Amazon, that probably would make better inlets for that. But since we're not controlling those areas, that project, we were viewing this as a what if it has to end up here, and that was sort of the challenge put in front of the design team to look at these. So we need to know more about that project as it develops, but these were really a, what if that project and MBTA come and say, this is where it needs to go. So that's why we're looking at these.
And
I appreciate, sorry, Diane, go ahead.
I'm wondering if that is the way that it ends up being. If we could almost make two roadways that have the same start and end point, but one is actually a drive into the high school campus and the other one is a drive up into the T station that run parallel to each other.
I was thinking the same. So I'm
Yeah,
glad you
that's
said
what I
that.
would have
And I'm-
suggested for this.
Yeah,
this is
I'm looking
kind of
at it
layout.
from just how is this going to impact our project,
Yeah.
right? Like, I appreciate the study, and I just, as I'm looking at it, I'm like, what are the commuters doing versus people trying to access the school? So I had a similar thought, Diane. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
assume if
We had talked
were
about
to-
that, exactly that in the
Yeah.
site committee meeting. That you could put an island in that roadway and have two very separate roads, one that services this and one that just goes to school.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'd want to get the traffic engineer's input on that. I think the turning movements out on North Shore Drive and the separation between the entry and exit for the school traffic and the commuter traffic, they'd have to look at closely. That's a signalized intersection, right? And
Yes,
how
it
that
is.
all works. But you know, it might be better actually to separate them with a little bit more distance than just that. But I'm sure it's possible. So I would like to go into a little bit of detail on this. This is the reason why we focused on option one, was because it doesn't have the, I would say, encumbrances or the unknowns of this MBTA station. And, you know, I think that the MBTA station, and if it has parking associated with it, would be on a completely separate timeline, and there's some uncertainty associated with that. And do we want to make one of the fields, like I said, the field is kind of interchangeable with this future municipal use, but if you notice here, if we're putting that field back on the other side of the ditch, we're giving up some of the flood mitigation area. And so we're just moving around pieces of the puzzle. This puts the field in closer proximity to the school, which I think is good. And it's not dealing with the uncertainties of the MBTA station or parking garage. And the field, you know, could be at an elevation that floods more frequently to be part of the flood mitigation, or could be elevated with the ability to have floodwaters ebb and flow from subsurface chambers under the field. Those are still things that need to be worked out when we get the volumetric calculations. The other thing relative to we're calling it the multi-sport field, is that varsity baseball field that you see as an outline there could, we're showing it with another full-size rectangular field that could be used in the fall for soccer and field hockey, for instance. And if it's synthetic turf, you're not dealing with the intense wear and tear that you'd have on natural grass. You know, and on a previous concept, we had shown a softball field overlapping that could potentially fit on the single field. I'm thinking about Title IX, gender parity, but you could also make a hybrid field. If these are just going to be used for practices, that baseball field could have a portable pitcher's mound, and you could also practice softball in that same space. It's just basically programming time for the field use. But this is the option one diagram, which we showed in a simpler form at the start of the site presentation. But let me walk you through this a little bit. This is really evolving from the previous site plan that you saw at a similar level of detail. It has, you know, the roadway parking infrastructure. It has the program areas around the building and contouring that shows both earth forms in the form of berms and basins or depressions that would flood temporarily and then drain back out, and you know, and dealing with the stormwater and also future flooding issues. So the building is still, as previously shown at elevation 15, and you know, one of the things that we've done as part of this site subcommittee, and it's not part of our presentation tonight, but there's been some fairly detailed future flooding analysis that Niche Engineering has done that has helped to verify the elevations that we're showing here in terms of, you know, the critical infrastructure of the first floor of the building and the life safety systems, you know, transformer, generator, and utilities will be all above that. And then how do you transition back down to minimize the amount of fill? Well, we're showing off of Plan North. You're coming out of a corridor, from more of the music and arts end of the building out into that, then transitions down from that location. Off of the entry plaza, you're coming out to the main drop-off area, which you'd have your accessible parking and some reserved parking, but it's not a large parking lot, as you can tell. That then transitions down to the baseball field and provides an opportunity for this spectator seating that's built into the slope. The pathways that you see have been laid out so that they're fully ADA compliant. They're sloping down without the need for handrails and ramps to get down to that lower elevation. And then as you wrap around, let's look out in the courtyard space. We've got this space directly outside of the commons and cafeteria that has the ability for outdoor dining. And that's actually a pretty nice southerly exposure. And then that could transition down and start to step down in the land with outdoor learning spaces that ultimately go into more of a natural landscape. That parking garage for the spaces under the building would still be accessed off of the ends of those two classroom academic wings, and that whole cafeteria plaza and entry plaza, a lot of that we're anticipating would be on structure, so there'd be the ability to park underneath. But that elevation of the garage parking is still pegged at elevation 4, and with the preliminary flooding analysis that's been done, when we know that that's going to have water in it at some periods of time, starting infrequently, but then over the life of this building, that frequency increasing. And so the corner of the building that shows the tennis courts, we're actually, in those tennis courts, there are 5 of them, which you need for a match, are shown actually on the roof of a garage. They fit, right? That footprint of that garage is very similar to the same footprint of the MBTA Wonderland garage. And you could actually come in and go out of that garage at elevation 13 from the VFW Parkway. And you could come and go from a lower level at elevation 4, which coincides with the same level as the garage under the building. But then, and if any of you know how the floor to floor works in the MBTA Wonderland garage, they basically use one double loaded bay of parking on a tilt. So you don't have a separate ramping system. You're using the garage itself to navigate through from level to level. That was the same logic for us with this footprint. And if you had 4 levels, like I mentioned earlier, that could be 600 spaces with 150 cars per deck. So what we're thinking is that, years 30, 40, 50 over the life of this building, when there's going to be more frequent flooding at the lower elevations, this could provide long-term protection against interruption to service and the use of the building. So you could have structured parking that's never going to flood in close proximity to the building, that you could get from the building over to the bus entrance, or the south planned south entrance there, without going down into the floodable zone. So I think overall, this is the update that we're showing. We'd like to see some response, what your thoughts are relative to this, the 4 options that we've shown. Are we going in the right direction? We're presenting this as an update. We'd really like to hear from you as to any feedback you have, if this makes sense, if you think we're going in the right direction. Are we missing anything?
David, only one thing I was going to mention was that the parking garage really is only necessary if you decide that you can't park under the building. Because there's over 300 spots potentially under the building, and those are in the floodplain. And
Correct.
that's the real key here, is that if you decide that you're okay for the time being, so we're really just saying, like, let's carve out a space for a potential future parking area that would future-proof your parking situation. But if you decide that you want to put tennis courts there and just have the parking under the building like we originally had thought, then we could do that as a start, and then you would have this space later to put this parking garage if you so choose.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I know that there's a lot of local knowledge about the limited flooding that occurs out there. Bob Bell, for instance, says, he drives by the site on a regular basis and has seen it over many, many years. And there's also the aspect of being able to get in there and start maintaining that ditch so that it actually does what it's supposed to do. It's clogged with vegetation. We know that it's not draining as well as it should. We know that the tide gates, are working well from what we've heard. Their elevation is set at a particular level. At some point in the future, those could also be modified to provide additional protection and future-proof on the inevitable increases in frequency of flooding from sea level rise. But that's a really good point. If the tennis courts simply go at grade, it's a low-cost demo, 10, 15, 20 years down the line to put a parking garage in there.
And I do think that when we get a CM on board, that's going to be one of these exercises that Dan, you and I at least talked about, that I'd like to go through sort of a comparative cost little analysis with them to talk about, underground versus this, and also look at it in terms of design. What's it look like to the massing of the building, et cetera. So I think when we get a CM on board, elevated garage with tennis over it right out of the gate versus underground parking is something that we want them to peel back the onion on a little as we're doing schematic design pricing.
Yeah, I agree.
Can I just ask, so the building has to be at the certain elevation, so we're gonna have that under the building space, period,
That was
right?
my
Correct.
point, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, and you're right. It's really, the assumption has been we can live with that. I think comparing it to what if most of that or all of that is elevated into 3 layers under these tennis courts, I think is worthy of exploration. The space is going to be there either way. Is it finished into a garage with access, et cetera, is going to be the question. But I think we're going to stick with under building parking, but at least from a future point of view, exploring what it would take now or in the future to put a garage way over on the left of the plan here, I think is worth peeling the onion back on.
It's certainly nice to have that option in the future, that you have that
Yeah.
property kind of carved out, that you could do it if need
Correct.
be.
So I think maintaining the plan space from a plan use point of view here, I think it's a perfect idea, because we can either just go tennis courts, or we can go that direction if something in schematic design points us that way, or the school can go there in the future.
I see John Perella has a hand up.
Thank you. I got a question about the flood mitigation areas. I'm wondering, we do have projects, for instance, in our science departments where they venture out into marshlands. Are we able to actually create a marshland that would do the trick of providing the need of that sort of flood zone need, but also provide a learning opportunity, like a learning classroom outside?
I'm
I can't say
sure.
that with 100%,
Oh.
but I bet you 99% they would be happy, that the DEP would be thrilled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sense of that is it's going to be largely freshwater fed
Yeah.
from stormwater runoff. And so
Yes.
it wouldn't have the same ecology as your Rumney Marsh does, that's got the saltwater or brackish water interface. But it will be a wetland, a wet area that floods where water comes and goes and offers a lot of biodiversity potential.
And even
Yeah,
that's a learning experience to compare what they see at Rumney Marsh to what they see in this kind of more freshwater wetland.
Right. If I could just add to, like, one of the things I know that the projects people were considering focusing on programs were those sort of natural resource programs, and that's specific to the city of Revere. So it could actually be, it could meet both those needs.
I agree, and I'm going to pipe in just with a general getting back to really why we're focusing on the whole site here. I think it's driven by a lot that we're learning as we go down the wormhole on site design, stormwater, and eminent domain. It's partially driven by the amount of flood mitigation space that we assume we need here, and it's partially driven by intricacies of the eminent domain process that sort of involve, if we're going to leave the existing owner with something, we can't leave them with something that's undevelopable without potential financial risk to the city in a post-taking environment. So if the legal team that the city has working on this is pointing towards the wisest decision long-term financially is going to be to take the whole site. So that and our understanding of maintaining fields and still having flood mitigation areas has driven us to really look in detail about the whole site. So that's a work in progress. It is both related to environmental design issues and intricacies of the MSBA, the eminent domain process. So I just wanted to throw that out there so people understood why we're really focusing on full site.
And can I ask a question on that, Brian, now that you bring it up? Could it be a possibility that the area that we're calling future municipal use could be retained by the current landowner? Like that could be part of the negotiation?
I think that's reasonable. I think it could be, and I think that's definitely something that would be thrown out there.
Okay.
It really comes down to if we leave them space. They, as James pointed out, and the team sort of confirmed, they're going to have to do all this work. So if you were to picture this and envision that right side of this diagram where you see the two shapes showing flood mitigation and the future municipal use, let's say we left them that, they're going to need a lot of that for flood mitigation. We're still going to need a similar amount, which is what would risk one of these fields going away. But the more we hedge them in with less and less developable space, the more they have a argument in court to look for damages, et cetera. So it could be a lease it back to them. It could be give them something, it could be take the whole thing. And you know, if this site can really solve three really big civic needs here, one is high school, one is we properly figure out how to interface with the MBTA station, and you know, this future municipal use potentially for a fire station, knowing that I'm not sure the Beachmont fire station project is going anywhere, that there is some real upside to that. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff for the city to get done, but I personally think it would be a pretty fantastic use of this site if that's the way it works out.
Thank you.
But
And I'm just going
go
to
ahead.
nudge us to be mindful of time because it's 7 o'clock now.
Yeah, I think we're basically what we wanted to cover. We did want to just sort of, this option one is the one that I think the direction we'd all like to lean in. And I think some of the other ideas more come in on if we get encroached on by the train station, if we find out significantly worse news than we currently think about how much flood mitigation space we have. But as long as everyone's sort of on board with this, this is the option we see with the most upside for the project. That's what we'd sort of like to hear tonight. Not necessarily looking for a motion or anything, but I would like the design team to sort of leave with some direction of this is the preferred way we want to go. Option one, as we learn more things.
If I can ask before they go into that, can David and the design team speak more to the negatives of touching that Eastern County ditch? And you guys are purposefully leaving that alone, I'm presuming, because it's going to be expensive to do anything to, or, yeah.
Dan, did you want to speak to that? You're muted.
Yeah, I think that, James, I think we're hesitant to go too deep into that because it's probably going to become a very serious permitting issue.
Okay.
Rerouting.
With a lot of time constraints, if we start to play or try to reroute.
Yep.
It's a Chapter 91 issue, and it right now, if we leave it as it is and we kind of do minor things around it, then it would be viewed as a minor reconfiguration by them. And if we start to kind of reorient it, then they're going to get much more involved in it. And I think what we're trying to do is avoid them getting much more involved.
Who's they?
In that. DEP and all the other entities that would be involved with the Chapter 91.
And
Yeah.
sorry, I'm going to push on that. Who's DP? Like, can you tell us who
DEP,
it-
the Department of Environmental Protection,
Okay, thanks.
and
Yep.
and
The
NEPA,
stormwater police, basically. And
stormwater people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
when we say leave it alone, we absolutely mean clean it up, class it up. It
Yes.
won't be a
Right.
current looking Wonderland ditch running through there.
right. But it stays in that configuration. Once we start to try to change it, then there's going to be a lot of questions and math and permitting aspects that come along with it. Although there is, in my mind, there, if you see underneath, David does have this shown, there's a squiggly little line there. And that squiggly little line, I believe, is the old river, the old riverfront, that historic. And there may be benefit to us to at least kind of chase down the idea of rebuilding some of that river when you hit the end of that field there, because it squares off the site rather than having the diagonal, that part.
Mhm.
So there might be something
what you're saying.
there to kind of think about, is maybe that piece, and it is, we because the ditch itself is a man-made. But I think we're avoiding it now because of the permitting and the other issues that come along with that.
And building over it is part of that same issue. That is considered a
Same
major or a major change. or whatever you wanna call it.
Significant change, and then
Yeah.
there's a lot of there's other issues that come with putting it in a culvert, because now it has a dimension that it's bound into, unlike a culvert, which is not bound, or a
Ditch.
this open ditch, which is not bound into a dimension. So there are culverts that go under these couple of bridges that are on the site that I think are like either 54 inches or so in diameter, I believe is what they are. And those are constricting the water flow. So there's a whole bunch of math that would need to be done, and a lot of guesswork about how exactly what would happen later on. So we're trying to kind of keep the status quo and clean up the ditch and not move it around too much.
Thank you.
And I think this plan shows that you can make use of the other side of it. We can use the crossings that currently exist. It's not meaning that land on the other side of the ditch is worthless. So.
Dan, you want to just kind of take us home with this?
I am. I'm gonna
Great.
be
Okay.
mindful of time. SD working groups, we've been very successful getting through most of the meetings that were on the list. I've repopulated the next group, and a lot of those are site groups, MEP. We think we're ready to go and bring this site design over to police and fire and have a conversation with them. I'm targeting that for May. And today was the auditorium group, and I'm guessing that meeting happened. So next one. MEP working group, little update. We talked about the last meeting, we talked about terminal devices and the systems overall. We seem to be working our way towards active chilled beams. There's a little bit of information here about those. We also talked a lot about fan coil units and ground source water to air heat pumps, VRFs, and distributed kind of displacement ventilation, systems. We seem to be working our way towards a 4-pipe chilled beam, active chilled beam system right now is what we're zoning in on. But as we kind of come down to those decisions, we'll get back to everybody. And we are now looking to go to visit other schools that both Left Field and Perkins Eastman either have designed or worked on that have these systems, so that we can actually talk to end users about how they are working and whether they like or dislike. And then finally, the sustainability working group. We had a great turnout at the last meeting. We went through kind of goals, and it's nice to see that a lot of the goals from that group and the things that they're saying align very well with things that this group has said over the last couple of meetings. So there was really nothing new. There was just a lot of the same kind of feelings about energy and materials and interior quality and water use and the site. And so there was nothing really new, but there was a lot of like reinforcement of the same kinds of things that we're all thinking about.
Dan, do you have a list of members for each of the subgroups?
I do.
I think some of us have lost track of that a little bit. Would it be possible to send that out to the school building committee?
Can do, sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, and that's unless there's questions, that's all I have.
Any questions based on the presentation, or should we just click into a quick public comment here? No committee questions. I don't see any hands.
No question. I'll just say, great work. It's all really, really interesting, and we appreciate the hard work that went into it.
We're getting there. It'll take a while. It'll be an interesting summer, really locking the site down. So expect a lot of content in the future as we continue to develop this with the design team. So quickly, I'll go to public comment. If you have public comment, we're going to need a name and an address for the meeting minute record. You're free to put your hand up or just let me know. I know we have a few people on here that don't look like committee members. So any public comment, name and address first, if so. I do not see any hands up. Last try. There are no public comments, then we would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. I will do a roll call to adjourn the meeting at 7:09 PM. Mike Picardi.
I saw his lips move. It said yes.
I started lips moving, but you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yes.
Thanks. Stacy Rizzo.
Yes.
Thank you. Susan Gravellisi had to leave at 6:30, so she is now absent. Dr. Kelly.
Yes.
Carl Svensson.
Yes.
John Corella.
Yes.
Rich Fiskay.
Yes.
And I believe that Patrick Keith also had to leave early, so he is now absent. So with that, thank you very much, everyone. And
Linda, I do
I'm
want to
here.
point out Jerry Visconti is here. I believe he came on, Jerry, was it about 6:15?
I believe so.
I mean, sorry,
thank you.
5:45 maybe? I don't know.
All right, perfect. I'll put you in for 6:15 arrival and motion or approval to adjourn the meeting, Jerry.
Sorry, I
Yes.
should have mentioned that when I saw him come on.
No problem. Thank you. I have my list, but it's been a couple of people have dropped off early, so I missed somebody actually joining. Thank you.
Good night,
you,
everybody.
Mike.
All right. have a
Thank
great
you,
night,
everyone.
everybody.
It was a very informative night.
Great meeting.
Thank you, guys. Have a great night.